Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Bienvenidos, Fright fans, and welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Jaime and Fuego, and returning once again for another Patreon review from our dude, Sam Glass. That is right, one of our longtime supporters and friends here on the Horror Show channel, and so stoked to be getting back to a recent request from him. He always throws them out of left field, you know, whether it's myself, Cecil, Robert, whoever is getting onto it. It's usually something that I have never heard of at all, and so props for always keeping things interesting and enlightening in Sam's regard. And this is a film that I had never heard of at all. It's from 1987, and it's called Retribution. And so it is so 80s, but so awesomely 80s, I have to say. And so the film starts out with it's kind of a first-person shot, almost like Police Squad status, of a awesome synth score. And all of the different music that is featured throughout this film is awesome. And so we will get to that. But so it's the perspective of just the red light on top, when there's an emergency and some officers are heading to, a prospective crime scene, or where a crime in this case is about to transpire, and it is a crime of self-infliction, because you have this guy by the name of George Miller, who they don't really go into a lot of backstory, and we're not trying to spoil things here about why he is on the top of a building trying to commit suicide, but he is, and it's Halloween night, and so we see all of these very cool shots of crazy masks that people are wearing that night and whatnot. But as you would expect, there is a crowd that has gathered, down on the street side of this building that George, this painter in Los Angeles, is about to jump off of. He proceeds to jump off, and yet he does not die. Lands on top of a vehicle, and they show in a mini little, montage scene of his recovery. So he's initially, both legs broken, just miraculous survival because of the fact that, he was just landing on a vehicle and whatnot. But so legs broken, casted up and everything, and then it eventually finds him as we get to some dialogue. He's in a mental institution rehabilitation sort of place, and he is finally healed enough both physically and mentally to go back out into the world, of which he does. And he was seemingly a beloved person, despite the fact that there are other scenes in the film where they allude to the fact that he kind of kept to himself. But hey, I'm going to ignore those particular contradictions because of the fact that overall thoughts, I greatly enjoyed this movie. Sam, you suggested another little hidden gem that I had never heard of, and it was, from a visual standpoint, very ambitious, from a score and a sonic standpoint, whether it was a reggae song or a weird song like Living in a Cesspool, which we have when he's in this bar at one particular point. And the acting was solid throughout, especially the actor who plays our lead, George Miller. And I laugh every time I'm like, George Miller, the director, right? The guy who did Mad Max and Happy Feet. But I dug this. It was something I probably never would have sought out aside from Sam and, just bringing it to my attention, which is really dope. And so, story, I already gave some tidbits about it, but it really primarily focuses upon after he has rehabilitated enough to go back to his building that he lives in, where everybody has missed him and is so glad and maybe even a little bit more appreciative than they were initially when he was there. They're just happy that he survived, and so they throw him a welcome back party, which is one of the goofiest scenes in the entire flick. There's this dude Dylan in it who rides this motorcycle into the party, and George sits on the back and they ride around, and it's it's something else, especially with some of the accompanying music. But there's also a girl who is a hooker, prostitute, and yet she kind of has the hots for George for whatever reason. It seems like a very peculiar pairing, but I would imagine it's because of the fact that she encounters nothing but scum who are wanting to pay her for sex, and so the nice, shy, creative guy, even though he looks a lot older than her, I don't know, whatever. But the performance from the actor who is George, at least when he is George, he's a very sweet soul, and so you can kind of understand to a degree where a woman in that sort of profession would want something as incredibly, completely different than what she encounters in the situations where she is making money. And so, yeah, Angel is, like, the performance from her is good too, and yet there's also the other woman on the other side that you can tell George has feelings for, and that's the, I guess, psychologist, I always forget the distinction, regrettably, but the woman who was helping him with his mental rehabilitation when he was about to go back into society. And so, George has two women that he has feelings for, obviously, and then everybody else is relatively secondary, aside from those two women. I mean, yes, there's colleagues of the doctor who helped him get back mentally on his feet to go, and leave the facility after his attempted suicide. And then, the opposite side of Angel, who lives in his complex. And so that's why she was asking about him getting injured and how, his recovery was going. But, excuse me, the biggest thing is that post-accident and post, getting back out into the world, George starts having these weird, almost, I don't want to spoil things, and that's where you can rent this in standard definition for 99 cents on Amazon. You can rent it for $1.99 in HD, and I totally recommend. It's a very interesting artifact from the 80s, because from the costuming to the music and just the vibe of LA at that time, and obviously that being before my time, it's fascinating and it's fun, and it's very cool in that regard. And so it's nothing that's gonna like take a massive amount of money out of your pockets or anything to check out. And so as he's back in society, he starts to realize that post-accident there is a presence that is within him, and he is trying to figure out, as a series of murders start to transpire, how responsible or directly involved he actually is, because there is a sleep aspect associated. So is he waking up and going and killing? Is he just dreaming about these things? It keeps it interestingly vague, and there's a lot of backstory as to why this has happened. It deals with a shared birthday on April Fool's Day. It deals with the fact that he tried to kill himself on Halloween, and there is something else that ties that together. So it does keep the mystery as George is trying to wrap his head around it, because he's having deja vu throughout the entirety of it. And so he's like walking around the city, and he's like, I don't know if I've ever been here before, but I feel like I have. And he encounters a few people, and he thinks he knows this woman, at this bar, and she's like, no, I've never met somebody like that before. Especially when he orders this interesting, I think it's like a Rinaldi is what it was, but it's a form of Greek wine that was popularized when they were trying to figure out, before bottling, like how to keep the oxygen out so stuff wouldn't completely spoil and be of no use for drinking. And so there's some interesting kills that we will go into, but it's not of the graphically gory variety. I mean, there's buzzsaws, and there's, like severed limbs here and there, and squash faces, but there's not an abundance of gore. It's really just from a storytelling standpoint and from an acting standpoint, trying to wrap your head around why this guy thinks he might be responsible for some of these killings, trying to figure out if he is or is not, and also just how he's kind of picking up all the pieces as an artist and as a painter. And there's some really funny, goofy moments too. Like there's a scene where Angel and George get blazed up, and they go to this art gallery, and they're looking at all of these really impressive bits of, metal paint and neon lighting, and then this ginormous Ted that looks like Easter Island sort of status. And so you could tell that this had some budget behind it, not like a massive budget or anything, but this is not low budget schlock. And I mean, from a lighting standpoint too, from some of the greens and the reds that they do, there is a trippiness to this as well that, to quote Jim Morrison, getting psychedelicized. And also the music that I mentioned as well a few times. Everything from the weirdness of the Living in a Cesspool song at the bar to, African weed man from Jamaica, and they go in this reggae bar at one particular point as Dylan and Angel are trying to figure out like why George is having these panic attacks and this anxiety and tripping out so much. And they, Angel being a love interest and Dylan being a friend who's underdeveloped. There's a lot of underdeveloped characters in this, to be fair. But they go to this reggae bar, and the music there was interesting. So it spans the gamut of everything from, rock to reggae to, almost like dark synth sort of stuff that I could see where bands like Dance with the Dead and even, Gunship and, Time Cop 83 and FM 84 and stuff like that, like those sort of dark synthwave bands would have derived inspiration from not just John Carpenter, but from the guy who scored this. So really, it's nothing that is going to like knock your socks off and become your new favorite, but it is definitely something that I feel like there's an audience for, and it is such an intriguing time capsule of this snapshot of the seedier side of Los Angeles in the mid-'80s. And dude, Sam, I really enjoyed this one. It was another pleasant surprise on my part, and yeah, I cannot thank you enough, as per always, sir. So, a grande gracias, as I, at least when I'm doing these solo patrons, like to say here. If you would like to become a patron yourself, some of these migrate over to the main channel, others just reside here on the Patreon, but all of the information is in the links below. The liking, sharing, subscribing, all that stuff, it most definitely helps with our algorithm and with spreading the word about our channel that was commandeered for over 2 weeks, and yet we are so very happy to have things back properly. And until the next time, Fright fans, because I'm going to do 2 more of these today, I've been Jaime and Fuego, and remember to stay scared.